Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. In this episode, we discuss the boycott of Israel and Zionism in American colleges and universities, and how a nonprofit is working to stop this boycott. I am Evelyn Marcus, and in addition to being a psychologist, I'm featured in the documentary about anti-Semitism, Never Again Is Now. I am a Dutch Jew and a daughter of Holocaust survivors. In 2006, I immigrated to the United States because of the rising anti-Semitism in Europe.
I am Phyllis Zimbler-Miller, the founder of the free nonfiction Holocaust theater project, thinedgeofthewedge.com. I grew up in the Midwest in the town of Elgin, Illinois. It was not a Holocaust community. Our parents and grandparents had come at the turn of the 20th century to avoid the Tsar and other pogroms. And yet in 1970, only 25 years after the end of World War II and the Holocaust, my U.S. Army officer husband and I found ourselves stationed in Munich, Germany. And this changed our lives forever.
Miriam Elman is currently the executive director of the Academic Engagement Network, AEN, a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. Her organization is focused on educating and empowering U.S. academic faculty and staff to stand up against boycotts of Israel and other forms of hostility to Israel. She was a tenured faculty member at Syracuse University and the research director at an advanced program on conflict and collaboration. She frequently speaks and publishes in Jewish, national, and Israeli media. In 2018, the Allgemeiner named her as one of the top 100 people positively influencing Jewish life. Miriam, we're delighted to have you on our show, and thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure.
Tell us, are there things in your personal background that motivate you to do this work?
I think everybody has sort of their Herzl moment, right? Like what happened to you in your career as a faculty member that made you think, I really can't stay on the sidelines anymore. I have to speak up. And for me, that was around 2012, 2013. I had been doing my work. I had already received tenure. Sometimes I did Israel as a case study. I'm a comparative international relations, security studies scholar in my work. And some of my work did dovetail with peace and conflict resolution. But, you know, I was not an activist. I was a scholar and a teacher. And then in 2012, 2013, there was a national effort by the American Studies Association to adopt the wholesale boycott of Israeli academia. And universities around the country were being asked to challenge that, to question that, to oppose it. And on my campus, we actually had debates about it, about whether it was a good thing to deny our students the educational opportunities in some of the best universities in the country. And so that was my Herzl moment when I realized there are a lot of faculty colleagues on this campus that have such hostility toward Israel that they are willing to actually, you know, run roughshod over professional responsibilities and end study abroad and end research exchange with places like Hebrew U and Tel Aviv U. And it was very personal to me. It really bothered me because I lived in Israel for 12 years and Hebrew University of Jerusalem is my alma mater. I got my undergraduate degree at Hebrew U, and it's a campus that is so diverse, and all Israeli campuses are so diverse. They bring in a composite of entire Israeli society. They work very hard to increase diversity and equity inclusion, and they're the very spaces in Israel that should not be boycotted. So I was really upset by this, and that was my Herzl moment. And since then, I've been fighting the fight that you're fighting.
Well, we thank you for fighting the fight, Evelyn.
Miriam, when I grew up in Europe in the 60s and 70s, most Europeans had a positive view of Israel and Zionism. When I left Europe in 2006, that had turned into a negative view. Academia, European academia, was the first to turn negative. Then that spilled over to the cultural elites, and from there to the media and the population. That's what I observed when I lived in Europe. Now we see more and more anti-Israelism, anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism in American academic institutions. What percentage of the American academic institutions, faculty, staff, and students have turned into anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and pro-boycott by now, by and large?
So it's a really good question, and we're often asked that at my organization, Academic Engagement Network. How bad is it? How bad is it really on American campuses? And I do think it's important to differentiate European and American academia, and also probably differentiate UK versus French versus German, because it is very different in these different arenas. And we focus on the American Academy. Our faculty members, we have about 800 now on almost 300 campuses, but only in the United States, because it's a particular set of constraints, opportunities, legal and otherwise, that make it important to differentiate country by country. Now, there are some 4,000 US accredited institutions of higher education in the United States. And, most of them are not hotbeds of anti-Semitism. They are not places where Jewish Zionist students are being denigrated, demoralized. But on the 100 to 150 campuses, East Coast, the West Coast, the Chicago hub primarily, where most Jewish students enroll on those 100 and 150 campuses. That's where the majority of Jewish students are matriculating, are enrolling, are doing their undergrad and graduate degrees. That is where there is a new pernicious reality. Those campuses are being targeted, by the way, by the far right, by white supremacists and white nationalists. There's an uptick in that kind of targeting, hostility, anti-Semitism. But those campuses are also places where anti-Zionism and Israel hostility, unhinged Israel hostility, is being normalized, mainstreamed, in some cases baked into departments, particularly in the humanities and the softer social sciences. And those are the campuses where Jewish Zionist students, and not only Jewish students, but Zionist Christian students as well, are feeling ostracized, marginalized, in some cases humiliated, harassed, in some cases even it leads to discriminatory action against them.
Are there colleges and universities where lots of Jewish students study, where one can still freely express love of Israel and Zionism? Which ones would that be?
So we have a lot of parents and grandparents who ask us, where should our children go? Where should they go to study? And I always say, look, they should study where the best program for what their interests are, and not right off a campus because it's had a negative incident or it's appeared in the Jewish press in a negative way, right? Because our students should go where, our Jewish kids should go where the best, and they shouldn't base their decisions solely on the incidents that happen. But I would say that it's really important to look at where there is a strong Hillel and a strong Chabad on campus, because those are good, safe spaces, right, for Jewish Zionist students. And they ensure that when there is an incident, there will be, hopefully a strong response by the administration. That is also, by the way, a good litmus test. Look for whether the administration has responded forcefully and unequivocally when there have been incidents. Look for whether there's an action plan in place to address campus anti-Semitism. And so there are some schools that are really turning things around, and I think we should appreciate that and support it. No school should be written off. No school is unable to change. And so, I think that I wouldn't even say, well, this is a great school and this is a not great school to go to on our issues. They should feel free to enroll wherever their interests lie.
Okay.
I like that answer. Besides, maybe they can become an activist to help turn the
Absolutely,
universities
absolutely.
around.
Right.
So, but let's talk about how the boycotts and hostilities against Israel manifest themselves in American universities. Can you give us some examples?
There's a lot of different ways. Let me count them.
Right.
So one thing we saw a year ago, which we actually engaged on it at AEN, is faculty pledging not to write letters of reference or letters of recommendation for students who want to study abroad in Israel. And there were faculty who stood up and publicly were proud of doing that. And we partnered with the ADL actually to release a model statement that universities could adopt in their handbook for faculty, that you shouldn't politicize decisions about study abroad, right? You shouldn't allow your own pet agendas and your own personal parochial viewpoints determine opportunities for your students, right? So that was an important campaign that we did, and a number of universities said, right on, like we are actually going to give that guidance to our faculty and put a stop to this. But yet hundreds of faculty we know are just refusing to write these letters. So that's one kind of boycott. Other kind of very sort of explicit boycotts are efforts to shutter centers of research in Israel. So there's a campaign actually underway right now at Columbia University that is faculty driven to get the university to nix its plans to develop the 11th Global Center in Tel Aviv. So they have other global centers in countries that, by the way, are not designated as fully free by Freedom House. And Israel is designated as fully free. And yet these faculty have circulating a petition to have the university shutter its plans and not move forward with this global center in Tel Aviv, which of course deprives students at Columbia and faculty of so many opportunities across so many different disciplines. So our faculty has stepped up with their own petition and are getting a lot of signatures at the moment saying, no, this is not appropriate. You can criticize Israel, but not in this way, not by running roughshod over academic freedom and open inquiry and intellectual exchange. But we do see virulently anti-Israel faculty trying to shutter intellectual exchange in Israel and programs and centers. There's also boycotting any perspective that isn't anti-Israel. So in May 2021, as Hamas was hurling 4,000 rockets on Israeli civilians, Jews, Muslims, Christians, during the hostilities that spring, about 200 departments in women and gender studies issued departmental statements pledging not to teach the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from any perspective other than the BDS perspective, other than the anti-Israel Palestinian perspective. Now, Israel studies is a very rich field. It has many perspectives in the peer-reviewed literature, and a position like that taken by a department to skew pedagogy and the curriculum in one way is very damaging to the educational experience for students. It shortchanges them. And so that is another boycott. In a sense, it's a boycott of scholarship and a boycott of learning and of educational opportunities for students that those departments very proudly pledged to do, and we engaged on that as well. And lastly, I would say there's some student-driven boycotting that we see. There's a boycotting of courses. University of Chicago there's a year-long campaign underway by Students for Justice in Palestine, a student organization, a chapter there, to convince peers to boycott and, pardon the French, shitty Zionist courses. That is how they phrased it. And those are courses that might be taught by visiting Israeli scholars, but also courses by Jewish faculty on Israel themes. Multiculturalism in Israel was a course that was boycotted. So anything that does not jive with the anti-Israel narrative would be open to boycott. And again, such a stance is antithetical to everything the university stands for, to the university mission of open inquiry and free intellectual exchange. So those are just some examples of what we see happen on the campuses today in the United States.
Are the universities in which these incidents and boycotts taking place, are they concerned about it? I mean, you must work with top people at the universities, and we can imagine what the impact is on the individuals, a student who wants a letter to go to a course in Israel. But what do the universities say to you?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. And we write a lot of letters to administrators, to presidents, chancellors, provosts, heads of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our faculty members do as well, because they are stakeholders on the campus and they want to improve the campus climate. And often we do get positive responses. We have them up on our website, that university leaders saying we will not tolerate an academic boycott. We will not support that. We will, in fact, ensure that there is open inquiry and intellectual exchange and a multiplicity of viewpoints. So we have had some good responses, and that also is in response to speakers who may be brought in who are virulently anti-Israel, who in past engagements have incited to violence, have disparaged Jewish students in the audience, have made anti-Semitic remarks that have been documented. When we raise that with administrators, you should know there is a speaker coming to your campus. Very often they will release a statement saying we will not tolerate hate speech on this campus. It is against our values. So I am seeing in the last 2 years, actually, Phyllis and Evelyn, I am more optimistic than ever that, and maybe that's because of what we're seeing out in the larger society, the uptick in anti-Semitism by celebrities and others, and it's just they're seeing it, they're understanding it, and they want to make sure that that is not something that's tolerated on their university and their college. So I'm seeing more and more university leaders step up and really be the moral compass on
That's great news. That's great news. Yes. Are the boycotts and hostilities spontaneous, organic, or are they organized?
That is a really great question. And oftentimes people think that this is very grassroots, that it's a group of 18-year-olds who come together to organize these types of campaigns. And that is absolutely not the case. I can tell you that the chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine that have organized this boycott of Israel-themed courses, they did not come up with the idea. They did not create the messaging. This is all coming from the national organization of Students for Justice in Palestine, the leadership. We cut students a lot of slack. They're learning, they make mistakes. They're 18, 19-year-olds. They are, you know, they are impressionable. They are being manipulated in many cases by the leadership of these national or sometimes international organizations. I want to mention for your listeners, PACB, the Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel. The acronym is PACBI, and you can go online and look it up. They've been around for 15 years. This is an umbrella organization of pro-boycott, pro-BDS groups, and they have issued guidelines of how you go about boycotting Israel and its supporters, by the way. This is not only hostility toward Israel, denigration, demonization, delegitimization of Israel. This is now the denigration of Zionism, of a key component of the identity of many Jewish students on campus, right? And so there are guidelines of how you go about disenfranchising Zionist students, how you go about shutting down their educational opportunities. And if you're a good foot soldier for the cause of BDS, you're supposed to implement. You're supposed to resist events that would bring Israeli and Palestinian scholars together to talk about coexistence. You're supposed to set up boycotts of those events, right? And so this is a very organized, very well-funded campaign that is national, and we need to see it that way, and not as just something that emerges in a grassroots way from a couple of 18-year-old kids on a campus.
Do you know
who are funding them, for
That's
example?
what I was going to ask too.
So that is not something that we at AEN research. We're look at the downstream impact that this has on campus and what's being taught and the programming that's brought in. But there are organizations in our space that are following the money trail and looking at where some of this money is coming from. And we know that it's not all coming from student fees, right? So every registered student organization has a pot of money that they can use for events. We're organizing a 5-campus tour next month to bring a speaker, and it's costing tens of thousands of dollars, right? You have to fly them over, you have to host them in hotels, you have to do, everything surrounding that, and that it cannot come from student fees, right? So this is a lot of money involved here, and what some of our organizations are finding is that some of that is Iranian money that is being funneled through in different ways, coming through different organizations, through the national organizations here in the United States. And then they can field 5 or 6 or, sometimes that many speakers in a semester across multiple campuses, right? So I think that there is a need to do even further investigation of that. I think there's different countries in the Arab and Muslim world that are finding ways to help fund this effort on our campuses.
So there is definitely an element of information battle between countries from outside the United States and Israel on American academic grounds.
They see academia as a very important arena. This is where American thought leaders are produced, right? This is where the next generation of lawyers and journalists and influential politicians come from, and that's why the elite universities are targeted, right? When you look at where are their Student for Justice in Palestine chapters, they're on about 200 campuses, and you look at the names, and they're all campuses that are among the most influential campuses in our country, right? So they want to be there, they want to be active there. And some of the more prominent, virulently anti-Israel faculty who are involved in the BDS movement are also at those campuses. They're in professional schools, they're in the law schools, they're on prominent campuses on the East Coast and West Coast and in Chicago. And so, I think that is an important element of what we're facing.
And I repeat it, I said it at the beginning of this episode. I have witnessed it in Europe, that it started big time in academia to be anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and anti-Semitic. And that from there, it trickled down to cultural elites, media, and eventually to the population. So
what starts on campus never stays on campus.
right.
And the kids graduate and they go on, right?
Exactly.
And our campuses in the United States are rarely hermetically sealed. Most events are open to the public. There's open campuses in many respects. COVID changed that a little bit, but for the most part, there is a lot of fluidity from the community to the campus, and communities that have virulently anti-Israel community groups also have campuses that are problematic and are issues, because those community members come onto campus, they egg on the students, they rile them up. So sometimes in those places, the Atlanta hub, the Chicago hub, there are Boston area, those campuses are hotspots because the community is also very fraught, and it's where some of these national organizations have headquarters. So the community campus relationship is one that's really interesting to look at and to consider as well.
Yeah.
Do you have specific programs to help faculty members deal with anti-Semitism, particularly if someone, one of the things that Evelyn and I work a lot on is what to say if someone says something anti-Semitic to your face, how to respond. So do you do training in that for your faculty members, the members of faculty who are members of your organization?
Yes. So, we were founded in 2015, and we were founded to be the faculty arm of this campaign to ensure that Jewish Zionist students and non-Jewish Zionist students have a welcoming, inclusive learning environment while they're on campus. And there really wasn't a faculty arm like that with members and chapters. And so there were a lot of student-facing organizations, but really not a faculty-facing one. And so now 8 years in, we have produced a lot of materials. And yes, we do a lot of training because most of our faculty join because they're concerned. They're concerned about what they see on their campus. They're concerned by what they read in the campus newspaper about an anti-Semitic incident, but they don't have the expertise. They're not in Jewish studies, anti-Semitism studies, Israel studies. We do have those members who are experts, and they help build some of the material that we have and give some of the training. But many of our members are in STEM, or in business, or in law, or in other disciplines that have no trade, but they want to be informed so that they can feel confident to speak out to colleagues and to administrators. And so we do a lot of strategizing. We go all around the country, have roving convenings, hub style city convenings where we meet with our faculty and give them that information. We're giving our faculty information all the time about what's happening on the campus, and we help them with drafting letters and responses. Again, we have the information, and sometimes we have the time, right? We have a staff that can help with that. And faculty, having been a faculty member for 25 years, I can tell you, nobody has time, right? They want to do the right thing. They want to speak out, but they don't have the time to sit down for 2 days and craft a letter and get the information and share it. And so that's where we come in, and our leadership team, we work directly with the faculty so that they can really respond effectively and in a timely manner. We produce a lot of materials. One of the things that we just produced was this guidebook on anti-Semitism, Jewish identity, and freedom of expression on campus. It's actually a guide for faculty and university administrators. It's up on our website. It's freely downloadable, and it's gone out to over 300 university administrators, and they're reading it. They're telling us, I looked at page 78 and it helped me to write a statement. And so the guidebooks that we do, we're doing a shorter version too, like a Cliff Notes version of this longer book, and we have pamphlets and resources so that if there's a faculty member who wants to be able to say, look, there's another way of understanding Israel, not just a settler, colonial, racist, imperialist state. Why not read this pamphlet? Share this pamphlet with your students or your colleagues, right? So we have those kinds of materials that help faculty make the argument, sometimes in opposition to their colleagues, right, who are also armed with material that's often factually inaccurate and biased. And so here they have some counter arguments that they can bring in, some material from other scholars of Israel that's credible and that stands up. And we've seen success stories with that.
That is also very good news that
Yes.
you have this practical tool available that so many people, I think, would like to use.
And a lot of that information, Evelyn and Phyllis, is on our website. Even though we're faculty facing and we produce things for faculty, a lot of our material is relatable to the general public and to students as well. Our pamphlet series certainly is short pieces that are up on our website, academicengagement.org, and they're free of charge, and people can feel free to access that.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Academicengagement.org. Okay.
Yes.
Evelyn?
What else is needed then, besides what your organization is doing? What else is needed, you think, to so that we can get rid of this anti-Israel, anti-Zionism trend in American academic institutions?
So, there is the legal remedy. And I want to include in there both lawsuits as well as complaints to the Department of Education. And students, faculty, helped by various nonprofits, are using that lever more and more. They're filing complaints with the Department of Education, alleging that there's been a violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and the Department of Education, the Office of Civil Rights, is opening up investigations to determine, has there been discriminatory action against Jewish Zionist students on the basis of their identity? Because Jewish students are protected under Title VI, just like Sikhs are, and Muslim students and Jewish students are as well. And to determine whether the university has become a pervasive hostile climate. When universities tolerate year after year, semester after semester, anti-Semitic rhetoric without putting in place remedial efforts and initiatives like trainings and educational programs, right, and dialogue sessions and mechanisms for students to report bias. So when they tolerate it year after year, then it gets to the point where you can say they're just like workplace harassment, right? There's a harassing situation for Jewish and Zionist students who are enrolled here. And that's when also the Department of Education has opened up some investigations. Right now, the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign is under investigation on those grounds. And sometimes settlements are reached. And we've been working with universities that have had settlements with the Department of Education to turn things around, and they're doing good work. I'd mentioned New York University under the leadership of Linda Mills, who is now president designate. She's coming in soon, will be installed soon, and she's done enormous work to really turn that campus around. So again, don't write off any campus. Really good people in leadership can really make a difference. But our organization, we want to get the campuses to be healthy before the lawsuit, before the complaint is needed, right? So that students can feel welcome and included and not have to go the legal route, right? That should be like a last resort. Should never get that bad. And so that's where we come in with education, because the university is not the street, right? On the street, the First Amendment applies, and you can say virulently anti-Semitic things, you can say factually inaccurate things, and you have your First Amendment rights to do that. But a campus is a community. And the First Amendment doesn't give a lot of guidance to how you create a community. People choose to come into a community of learning on a campus. Nobody's telling you you're forced to be here. If you decide to come in here, there are certain values that we expect every member of our community to uphold. And so I think the number one thing is not just to educate on anti-Semitism, but to educate the university leadership on their responsibilities to inculcate the values of the academy. And once they do that, you really see change. It has to come from the top. It has to come from presidents and chancellors. And then it trickles on down throughout the entire mid-level administrative apparatus so that they respond forcefully and unequivocally, constantly reinforcing the values of the university. And you see things turn around. And the Jewish students and the Zionist students say, wow, this campus is different. It's not that there aren't incidents, but I'm feeling supported by the university when they happen. And I'm feeling comfortable to be here. And there's lots of resources for me. Right. So the worst thing that can happen is when you're ignored, right? There, you don't have a seat at the table. You're disappeared. A lot of times it's not hostility. It's that just Jews aren't even included in any way. The holidays happen and there's tests on the holidays and there's no accommodations. And, so you're sort of rendered invisible. And we spend a lot of time working with administrators on how to give the Jewish community a seat at the table, even when there's a small Jewish community. And we've seen again here, under good university leadership, huge change in the experience that that Jewish Zionist students and faculty have, because faculty are also hurting. It's not just students. There are Jewish Zionist faculty who are self-censoring, who are afraid to express their identity, who fear professional risks from doing that. And they also need to be supported by their employers, by the university leadership.
Yes, definitely. And again, happy to hear that there are already, first of all, that there is a vision on how to, you have a vision on who to approach in universities to turn this around. And wonderful to hear that it has worked out already several times in a positive way. What do you recommend our individual listeners to do against the boycotts and other hostilities against Israel in American colleges and universities?
Yeah. So, sometimes you hear that community people are told, you're outsiders. Don't tell us what to do on the campus. That is not true. The community is not an outsider. It's an important stakeholder because the campus is embedded in the community. And what happens there affects everybody in the community, whether it's a large community, Jewish community, or a small one. So first of all, to let the university know that position, that your meddlers, your outside meddlers, will not fly. We care deeply about the campus that's in our community, where we live, and what happens there impacts us too. I think alums have a lot of leverage, more leverage than they realize. Faculty as employees are sometimes, told, well, we're not really going to listen to you. We listen to the clients, which are the students, right? Or we listen to the, faculty who bring in multi-million-dollar federal grants with overhead, they get listened to. Our STEM faculty are definitely listened to. But alumni are definitely listened to, and alumni who have positions in the university as trustees and other valued community members can make a big difference here. It's important, I think, to encourage the university to apply best practices and not to foot drag. There's a lot of foot dragging that happens and inertia that happens, and things need to happen a lot more quickly than they do. And so we recommend as a best practice that a university initiate and staff and create task force for addressing anti-Semitism, or an advisory council for addressing anti-Semitism that would include community members on it. And that would be a permanent infrastructure. When incidents happen, that group has developed trust. They've worked together over some years. They've had some training together. And the community can definitely should have a seat at that table and through those representatives, they can go and report out to the rest of the community, right? So it's a really nice link between the community and the university. I think that your listeners need to stay informed. We have a wonderful Jewish press. We have excellent outlets like Allgemeiner.
Yes.
I'm a little bit biased because they gave me an award, but I think it is an excellent outlet to follow every day, to hear what's happening on campus. They have campus. They have a faculty who's in our network who also monitors the campus and brings them newsworthy items to cover. So it's a great outlet, and there are others that also listservs and whatnot that you can get on, and you can stay informed so that you can tell Federation, right? Jewish Federation, local Federation, JCRC, those are very good addresses for those leaders to then go to senior leaders on a campus and say, look, our community is concerned about an event that's coming up, about a conference that's coming about something that happened that we read in the Jewish press. Not all the time is leadership on a university knowledgeable of even what happens on their own campus. Especially the larger campuses. They're not always know. They need the community to actually inform them. Why is this upsetting to us? What we would like you to do. And sometimes that involves a dialogue, right? Having that conversation and keeping that dialogue going. So staying informed and then making sure that local federation, local JCRC, I would add there, the local ADL representative can be very helpful to bring the concerns to university leadership. Lastly, I would encourage listeners to always remember that there is a faculty on the campus. Of course, that's our arena. And the faculty are permanent stakeholders. Students come and go and they graduate and they're not permanent, but the faculty are sometimes there for 20, 40 years. They know where the bodies are buried. They they know the institutional culture very well. And so they can help guide community members on what might be the right approach and who's the best person to approach and how should the engagement happen and what's the right response. So faculty, need to be engaged, and the faculty are also community members, right? They live there too. So engaging with them is a big part of the answer.
Thank you.
Miriam, this has been such an informative and valuable talk. And as we close, we'll give you a chance to have any last thoughts. I mean, I know we could go on for hours, but is there something really important that we haven't yet talked about that you'd like to talk about in 2 minutes?
Well, we have actually covered a great deal. And, I think that one thing I would want to say is that, there are a lot of organizations out there in the academy. And the academy is only one arena. There are other arenas that we need to be looking at. I'm quite concerned about K through 12. Our students come to us after 12 years of education, right? And we are seeing an increase in anti-Semitism, in virulently anti-Israel narratives getting baked into our middle school curricula, our high school curricula. It's not just one-off incidents. There's actually efforts to infuse a very one-sided and biased viewpoint on Israel and ethnic studies, which in some states is going to become a required course for graduation, right? And so we need to be more active there. And one thing that we are doing in AEN is we're trying to get anti-Semitism awareness training to schools of education in a kind of a train the trainers model, so that teachers all across the country will have some information about the needs and concerns of Jewish students, some knowledge about contemporary anti-Semitism, and when they see something or hear something, they can be confident to speak out and say something at the grassroots level. But I think that all your listeners who are sending their kids to public schools across the country have to stay informed on the K through 12 situation too, and engage, because the more we can get students who are informed and we have a lot of work cut out for us almost to deprogram kids, because they have been infused with this factually inaccurate understanding of Jewish identity, of Israel, of the Jewish experience, and it would be better if they were better educated on those issues as middle schoolers and high schoolers, and didn't come to us in such a bad state.
You said that very well, and I will say to our listeners that we recently spoke about parents and grandparents really need to pay attention to
Yes.
what their children are learning in middle school or in high school or being exposed to, and then speaking up at that level. So thank you for saying that part, because we absolutely agree that this needs to be looked at more. So our time is up. Thank you so much, Miriam. We appreciate it so much. Thanks to our listeners for listening. Any of you who have not yet watched Evelyn's really compelling documentary, Never Again Is Now, you can watch it on Amazon or YouTube. You can learn more about my Holocaust Theater project at thinedgeofthewedge.com. And as we finish every episode, we say, please, without putting yourself in physical harm, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.